The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. This is Smart Bear Software. We are starting a very exciting webinar on testing Adobe Flex and Flash applications with TestComplete 8, where we claim there's no magic required. Hopefully you'll see the same. The panelists today are Sergey Sokolov, that's me. I'm Director of Product Management for Test and Performance Solutions at SmartBear, and our inimitable Nick Olivo, Senior Automated Testing Solutions Engineer. So this is what we're going to talk about today. Since we have a relatively large audience, and for some it may be the first introduction to SmartBear, some may also know us under a different, I can say, maiden name. So we'll use this opportunity to talk a little bit about who we are and where we came from. So I'll take a few minutes to cover that subject. And we'll switch to the real meat of today's presentation, the new release of TestComplete 8.2. It was made public just this week on Tuesday. And the new support it includes for testing rich internet applications built on Adobe Flash platform. The bulk of the webinar will be devoted to the live technical demo by Nick, and then we'll wrap up with Q&A as usual. Just to get some administrivia out of the way, if you get a question as we go along with the presentation, please submit it using the Ask a Question feature box where you're watching the webinar. We'll be consolidating all the questions and answer them at the end of the presentation, and we'll split between Nick and I, depending on what the question's about. Second thing is, this webinar will be recorded, or actually is being recorded. So once we're done, in a couple of days, we'll post the recording on our website, smartbear.com. And all participants will be emailed, or attendees rather, will be emailed a link, assuming you registered with your email. And obviously want to make this broadcast available to as many folks as we can, so we'll be promoting that with other means. SmartBear in reality is quite an established company. We're more than 10 years old, on average. SmartBear is a result of merger of 3 independent companies over the last couple of years. Automated QA, the maker of the original TestComplete. SmartBear Software, the company behind the current standard for the automated code review, Code Collaborator. And Pragmatic Software, which now is responsible for the line of ALM Complete tools. So in our new reincarnation, as of last year, we provide a very capable and appealing family of tools focusing on development automation and quality. Our current portfolio includes tools for many critical tasks in modern software development. On the left side, you see that we have a few tools for the development folks. Code Collaborator for peer code review, DevComplete for development management, AQTime Pro for performance and memory profiling on Windows, and a very cool tool for build and release management called Automated Build Studio. On the test side, obviously the leader of the pack is TestComplete. We also have a test management offering, QA Complete, or a more extended framework, ALM Complete, for the whole application lifecycle management. We also offer free tools. You can go to smartbear.com and review those. For example, QA Planner is a free component you can use for test management. We're very proud that our tools continue to be recognized as state-of-the-art in the industry. For example, just last year, TestComplete won Jolt Award for the best test tool. And it's just the latest in a string of many awards that our tools won over the years. So for those who are new to TestComplete, we'd like to describe it at a very high level. TestComplete is an automated test tool to create and run tests for all sorts of Windows applications. Desktop GUI, command line applications, web applications, rich client server, and so forth. It supports a variety of languages and development environments, including Adobe Flash Platform, Microsoft Visual Studio, .NET, and Silverlight, C and C++, Java, etc. TestComplete is commonly used for functional end-user testing, commonly known as GUI testing, in both automated and manual fashion, and includes a broad support for test parameterization with external data as one of the key features. Also provides facilities to set up automated regression testing and distributed testing for complex client-server applications. So now we come to the main news. TestComplete 8.2 includes new test technology that simplifies and improves automated testing specifically for Adobe Flash and Flex applications. The most convenient side of all the improvements we've put in is that now these applications can be tested as is without any code or build changes. There are two methods that Nick is going to illustrate in detail, using loading during runtime in the web browser or using the debug version of the Adobe Flash Player. In both cases, the Flash app can be loaded up in the test environment as is, and the infrastructure takes care of getting visibility into the internals of the application. TestComplete now provides full access to the runtime objects of these applications in the Flash platform, including visual assets and native properties of objects. So there's actually a lot that you can do with the objects themselves, examining their state and verifying that the data is actually as it's supposed to be. And with TestComplete 8.2, we provide the same level of support and test methods for old-style Flash applications built with Flash Pro and the more modern Flex applications. So from the point of view of test flow, there's really no difference. Well, with that short summary, let me transfer the presenter to Nick, and he's going to take us through the test process using TestComplete. All right, once I actually figure out how to do this transfer, okay, here we go.
All right, thanks very much, Sergey. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the portion of the program where I'm going to actually show you how TestComplete works against a Flex-based application. Now, what I'm going to show you today can work with both Flash and Flex-based applications, and then we'll also take a few moments and we'll talk about how TestComplete can work with Adobe Air applications as well. Now, we're going to start out with the demonstration, then I'm going to talk about the actual mechanisms that are used in order to get access to the objects in your application via TestComplete, and then we'll turn things over to the questions that you folks have. All right, so here we are. I've already got TestComplete loaded, and the first thing that we want to do inside of TestComplete is create a new project. Now, for those of you who are new to TestComplete, you can think of a project as a collection of related tests and any relevant artifacts. So I'm going to give my project a more descriptive name here. I'm going to call this the Adobe presentation, and I'll click Next. Now, TestComplete allows you to test many different types of applications, as Sergey mentioned earlier. You can do, Windows client applications, web-based apps, Adobe Air apps, Java tests. You can even do Windows mobile devices. But for right now, what we're going to choose is a web-based test, and we'll click Next. And now inside the web testing world, the piece we're going to focus on today is functional testing of web pages. So I've got that. I'm going to click Next. And now in this screen, what I'm going to be able to do is specify the URL that I want to test and the browser that I want to test it with. And to do that, I'm just going to click this Add button. And then I'll just paste in the URL to my website. I'm just going to pop that right in there. You'll notice that TestComplete is also showing me a list of all the browsers that are currently installed on my system that are supported. In my case, I've only got IE loaded up here, so TestComplete picks that. And the last thing I want to mention in this screen is this auto run checkbox. What that's going to do is have TestComplete automatically invoke my browser to that URL when we start recording tests. All right, so we've got that. We'll click Next. Now this screen is new in TestComplete 8.2. This allows you to control how the test visualizer will behave. Now for those of you who don't know TestComplete, the visualizer is a mechanism that automatically captures screenshots of the application that you're testing both during the recording process and during test playback. If you've got a really long test, something that's going through hundreds or even thousands of screens, then taking all those screenshots may become a space problem for you, so you may want to turn that off. But for the most part, you want to keep this on, and I'll show you today a little later on exactly why you want to keep that on because of the really great features that it provides. Go ahead and click Next. And this final screen allows us to choose what scripting language our project will take advantage of. Everything that I'm going to show you today can be done without needing to have a coding background, but if you are someone who prefers to work in script, or if you've got a developer on your team, they'll probably want to work in code, and TestComplete allows them to choose from any one of these scripting languages. My personal preference here is JScript, so I'm going to select that and click Finish. Okay, so now our project has been created, and at this point, we're ready to start recording tests. So I'm just going to click this Record New Test button right here, and you're going to see TestComplete minimized down to this small recording toolbar, and then it's going to automatically invoke my browser and take me out to that URL that we specified. In this case, it's this little Flex Store application that you see right here. This is a sample that Adobe puts out, and we've taken it, and we're using that today. So I'm just going to go ahead, let's perform a test case against this guy. We're going to click on the Products tab right here, and we're going to select a cell phone to buy today. So we're going to search on the series filter right here, and I want the, whoops, clicked a little too fast. I want the 3000 series right there, and let's say that I want a camera that can work on tri-band. We'll just pick that. All right, so that takes me down to these three choices, and I want to add that blue phone to my cart that you see on screen. So I'm just going to hover over here, click that Add to Cart button. It's going to put the phone into my cart, and at this point I can see that my total is being calculated, not only the value of the telephone, but also the shipping costs of that phone, which give me a grand total of $140.99. So I want to verify that $140.99 value is accurate. And the way you perform verifications with TestComplete is with a feature called checkpoints. You can create checkpoints just by coming up here on the toolbar button, and this allows you to choose from any one of the 10 checkpoints that TestComplete provides. They all work equally well with Windows-based apps, web-based apps, and with Flex, Flash, and Air-based applications. So what we want right now is what's called a property checkpoint, because that $149.99 is just a property of one particular object on screen. And so what we want to do now is select that object by dragging this Finder tool over the object. So I'm just holding down the mouse, I'm dragging over, and you'll notice that TestComplete is drawing a red box around various items as I mouse over them. Anything we can draw that red box around is something we can create a checkpoint for you. So you can see here, I've captured a reference to that control, and we're referring to that control as Product Cart Label 4. And I'm calling this out because that's the actual name of the control as specified by the developers when they built this Flex application. So I'm not relying on a label that's adjacent to the control. I'm not relying on screen positioning or screen resolution or XY coordinates in order to locate that. I'm identifying the control based on its actual name. Okay, so we've got that control selected. I'm going to click Next. And now what we're looking at here is a list of properties that we might want to verify with our checkpoint. And the one we care about is this guy right here, Object Label, because that actually has the value we want to verify. So I'm just going to select that value, click Next. And then this last screen is just a summary of what the checkpoint's doing. You can see we're looking at that Label 4 object, and we're going to make sure that its label property equals that value. Say Finish. Okay, so now we've created our checkpoint. The final step in our test case would be to click this Submit Order button. And because this is just a sample application, it doesn't actually process the order, so you get this little submit order dialog. I'll just acknowledge that OK button right there. And that's everything I want to do for my test case. So now I'm going to stop recording. And now TestComplete's going to take all those actions that we just performed and render them as what we call a keyword test. And keyword tests are just graphical representations of every transaction that was performed during the course of the run. And it's very easy to follow along with what a keyword test is doing. You start out by invoking Internet Explorer, and then we navigate it out to our particular URL, and then we began performing actions against our application. So right here you see we clicked inside our combo checkbox, and excuse me, our combo box. It was called series, and I selected 3,000 from that value. And then there was that tri-band checkbox, and I clicked that so it's equal to true. And then I clicked the purchase button. So every action that I performed, there's a corresponding line here in our test case. Now you'll notice that as I select various actions in my test, this bottom panel is also highlighting. And this is that visualizer that I mentioned earlier. So what we're looking at right now is a screenshot of what the application looked like at this point in the recording process. So when I clicked on that button purchase, this is what my screen looked like. And we can zoom in on this guy a little bit here. So you can see we're clicking on that add to cart button. Now, the visualizer is great because it gives people the opportunity to look through the tests that's being performed and know exactly what's going on here. So if you've got new folks on your team who have never used TestComplete before, have never used your application before, the visualizer lets them quickly come up to speed on what a particular test is doing. But the visualizer is more than just pretty screenshots. It actually allows you to edit and modify your tests right from those screenshots without even needing to have your application loaded. So here, watch this. We've got this screenshot right here, okay? This is where I was checking or clicking the 3,000 element from the series checkbox. Let's say that I also wanted to type a value into this text field that you see right here, that find field. Well, let's zoom in on this guy a little bit. You'll notice that TestComplete is drawing a black box around that find field, and there's a little pointing hand hovering over it. This means I can actually insert actions against that find command field right from this screenshot. I'm just going to right-click on this guy, and I'm going to say insert on-screen action. And now that pulls up a list of the actions I can perform against that text field. And in this case, what we want to do is call the keys method, because that's what's going to actually type into the text field. So I'll click next here. And then we put in the value we want to type. So let's say we want to say hello world. And now we'll say finish. Okay, I'm going to close my screenshot here, and now you see that TestComplete has inserted that action into my test. Not only that, but there's also a visualizer image associated with that now. So I can see I'm going to be typing inside that find field because that's drawn with the red border around it. So TestComplete's inserted that command for me automatically. Okay, so now we've got our test created. We can actually go through and run it. Let me just reset my app back to a good state here. And you'll be able to see what this test looks like when it runs, and also what the results look like when they come back. So I'm just going to go ahead, we'll close the application down here, and we'll start from the beginning. There we go. So now TestComplete's going to take over. My hands are away from the keyboard and the mouse. TestComplete's driving the system, and it's going to perform that same sequence of actions that we just recorded. Okay, so we have invoked our products application here, and we've clicked on the Products tab, and now we're going to select from the series box there. Then there we go, we just typed hello world into the find field. So even though I didn't record that action, TestComplete is able to replay it successfully. There we go, we just clicked on our tri-band checkbox, we've added the item to the cart, and now we're going to verify that the total field is correct. So there we go, our test has just completed, and now TestComplete's going to bring up the log file and show us exactly how the test fared. Okay, so let's take a look at what's going on here. Our first thing to note is that our test was successful. You can see right here we have a green check mark associated with our test. That means that there were no problems with this particular test case. And now you can follow along with the steps in the log to see every action that was performed during the course of the test. So right here in the bottom pane, you can see exactly what control is being manipulated. So in this case, we were clicking on that products button. And then moving on to our next line, we were selecting an element from the series box. Now, in addition to storing information about the controls that we're clicking, TestComplete also stores pictures of both what the application looked like at runtime and what it looked like at replay time. So right here you can see the expected image is what's on the left and the actual image is what's on the right. So TestComplete is tracking all this information for a Flex application or for a Flash app just as it would for a standard Windows client application or for a regular web page. So TestComplete is going to be able to give you exactly what transpired during the course of your tests regardless of what kind of technology you're working with. Okay, so now that we've gotten our test created and we've talked a little bit about our results, let's take a look in a little more detail at how TestComplete is going to recognize the controls inside our application. You can see here that we are referring to the controls, again, based on their actual name. So in this case, the combo box is called series, the checkbox is called CB triband, etc. But then you hit a control like this guy right here. This is the find field. And in this case, TestComplete is calling it text input 135. Why is that? Well, just because TestComplete is going to refer to the name of the control as specified by the developers, that's not necessarily a guarantee the developer gave the control a good name. So if we look at this guy in TestComplete's name mapping editor, we can see exactly what properties are being used to identify a particular control. So right here, this is our series combo box, and you can see that its type is combo box and its identifier is series. But that text input box, well, we have it that it's a text input object, but there's no label associated with it. So TestComplete just falls back on a numeric in order to identify it. That's not a problem in this case because it's the only text field that's on screen. However, it's not necessarily intuitive as to what control we're working with if we look at that test case. So what TestComplete is going to allow us to do is rename that control within the scope of our tests to give it a more descriptive name. So instead of calling this text input 135, I'm going to rename this guy and I'm going to change it to txt find field. Makes sense, right? I'm going to press enter. And now TestComplete is going to pop up this box and say, hey, you've already got this text box 135 in your test cases. Do you want me to update it to use this new name? And we'll say yes to that. And now we come back into our test. There we go. TestComplete has automatically updated our control to be called text find field as opposed to text 135. So very easy for you to modify and maintain your Flex and Flash-based tests by using the name map as opposed to having to hunt through every particular test you've ever created looking for every instance of a given object. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about how we can record tests, and we've talked a little bit about how TestComplete is going to recognize objects in our application. But now let's take this a step further, and let's actually look at how TestComplete can give you more information about the internals in your application. So I'm going to click on this little Object Spy button right here in the TestComplete IDE. That's going to bring up our Object Spy utility. And what I'm going to do is point at the slider bar that you see right here in the products page. It's the one that allows me to specify what price range I want my phones to be in. And I want to learn more about that particular control. You're going to see a red box pop up around it. There we go. Okay, so now in looking at the Object Spy, TestComplete is showing us a list of properties about that object. Okay, so we can see that its identifier is price slider and it's of type H slider. That's terrific. But we can see more than just this handful of properties. In fact, by clicking on this advanced view link, we can see all the properties and methods associated with this object. The one in particular that I want to call your attention to is this flex object guy right here. And what this allows you to do is this is what grants you access to every property and method that exists for that control. So just a quick example here. I'm going to click on that ellipses. And now here's a list of all the methods and whatnot and properties that my developers would have access to. And I can manipulate any one of these either programmatically or with a checkpoint or what have you. So, for example, I've got the value highlighted right now. You'll notice that the little arrow over here on our slider starts at 0. That's what this value refers to. I can programmatically change that. Watch, I'm just going to change that from 0 to 350. And now when I press enter on my keyboard, you'll notice that the price thing has jumped. Now we're over at the 350 mark. Here, let's do that again. Let's make it 550 now. Now it jumps again. So you can programmatically manipulate any Flex or Flash object using this approach if you need to. And this is great if you want to just set your application up into a given state and then do a certain test against it, you could programmatically manipulate all these objects and then just boom, 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 application's ready to go, and now you can go ahead and test it. So really powerful and useful feature here when it comes to being able to interact with the underlying elements inside your application. Now everything that I've shown you today has been against a Flex-based application, but the same approach holds true for Flash-based apps. So it doesn't matter whether you're using Flex or Flash, TestComplete will be able to work with it. But then some folks out there may be saying, well, Nick, you say that, but what about Air? How's Adobe Air going to work with our with TestComplete? Let's go ahead and do that. In fact, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to add an Adobe Air application into my tested elements here. And let's record a test against an Air app really quick. So what I've just done is added my Adobe Air application to my list of tested elements here, and I want TestComplete to automatically load that up for me. Here we go. So here's my Air application. This is just a simple little orders tracker, and I want to post a new order into my system. So let's just go ahead and do this. Now you'll notice that as I start working with the application, TestComplete pops up this little dialog that says, hey, this application should be recompiled. Now the way that TestComplete gains access to an Air app is by having a special file included in the compilation. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. But what this is saying right now is that the application that I'm working with is using an older version of that special file. That's because this is a sample that was written with TestComplete 8.1. We just released 8.2 this week. I haven't had a chance to update my sample. So TestComplete is right on the ball telling me, hey, if you can get better recognition if you include a new version of this file. So I'm going to make a note of that. We'll do that later. Here we go now. We're going to go ahead and make some changes here. I'm going to order, say, 50 of my family album product. And I want you to notice that when I enter 50 into that field, that this discount field has automatically updated with a value of 15%. And that's intentional because when a customer orders a lot of this family album product, we want to give them a break on the price. So I want to create a checkpoint to verify that that discount field has in fact been populated with a value of 15%. Well, the checkpoint process is exactly the same for an Air app as it is for a Flex or a Flash-based application. You just click that button on the recording toolbar, and then TestComplete is going to pop up the appropriate wizard. I'm just going to select the discount field with the Finder tool. Just like what you saw earlier, TestComplete is drawing a red box around the control once it's selected. So I've got that guy chosen right now. I'm going to release the mouse. And again, just like what we saw earlier, TestComplete is going to capture a reference to the control based on its actual name. So we see the actual names of the controls for Flex, Flash, and Air-based elements. And then I want to verify the value of that field. Now you look at this real quick and you say, well, hey, wait a second, Nick, I don't see that 15% anywhere in this list of properties. Again, remember, we're only showing a subset of properties by default. So if the property you need to verify isn't shown, click on this advanced view link and then you'll be able to see everything that's out there. And in this case, we want that caption property right there because that's what actually contains the 15%. So I've got that selected. We'll click next. Again, here's our summary of what the checkpoint's going to do. Make sure that that caption equals 15%. Say finish. And then we just finish going through the rest of our test case here. I'd put in my customer name, Barry Allen, and street would be 1 My Street, and his city is Central, and his state would be Illinois, and his zip code, we'll just make that a 1. Give him a credit card. There we go, and we say OK. And now when we stop recording here, just like what you saw earlier, TestComplete will take all those actions, render them out as a keyword test. We get another little helper message here saying, hey, you could get better recognition by using a different file here. No problem. We'll say thank you for that. But now here we go. TestComplete was able to recognize all the controls in our application, again, using their actual names. Again, you get visualizer screenshots for every action that was performed. So right here, we're typing inside the street field. And again, you could put extra actions into your test right from the visualizer. And then we could replay this test right from the get-go and see everything that had transpired and get that detailed log information. So really, there's no magic required to get TestComplete to work with Flex, Flash, and Air-based applications. You can just record against them, and any feature that you'd normally have inside of TestComplete can be used against these applications. Okay, so now that we've talked about how TestComplete actually recognizes these objects, let's talk about how we get TestComplete to actually get that insight into those objects. So I'm just going to flip back to my slide deck real quick here. So we'll get this to show that screen. And really, there are 4 different ways that you can configure TestComplete to work with your application. Whoops, that was not the right slide. Right here. There we go. Okay. So there are 4 ways to configure your Flex Flash apps for use in testing. The end result is all pretty much the same. You get the ability to see all the internals of your application. However, the process for each one is a little bit different. So let's take a couple of minutes and talk about those right now. For starters, there's the Flash Injector approach. This requires no code changes and no changes to the system that's hosting the Adobe application. All you need to do is install a debugger from Adobe, make a 1-line edit to a configuration file, and then make sure that a particular folder has been added to your list of trusted locations. Believe me, it sounds a lot more complicated than it is, folks. In fact, this is the approach that I've been using during today's session, and as you saw, it works really well. And setting that up only took me about 2 or 3 minutes. And full instructions on how to actually do this are located at the URL that you see on your screen. And in fact, what I'm also going to do right now is paste a link to that site right now into the chat window. Just look at the GoToMeeting toolbar right now. You'll see that little blinking blurb down at the bottom there. Just click on that. That'll open up the chat window. You can copy the link right out of there and go check it out. And I skipped a slide. I skipped 2 slides. back. There we go. Okay. Now, an alternative approach is the runtime loader option. The great thing about this is all you need to do is copy a couple of files onto the computer where your Flex or Flash application lives. Again, there's no code changes that need to be made and no changes that need to be made in TestComplete, no changes to the system that you're testing from. Again, full information about the runtime loader can be found at that URL, and I'm also going to paste that into the chat window here. There you go. Now, for those of you out there who are already using TestComplete, you've probably been compiling special files into your applications all along. And those special files, the Flex client libraries, those are what make the internals of an application accessible to TestComplete. That approach is still supported in TestComplete 8.2. So if you're already using this, you can keep using it. Your developers don't need to change their build process or anything like that. And again, full information about that can be found right there at that URL, which just went into the chat window. There we go. And now for that one person out there, for that one sad, unhappy person who can't use any of the approaches stated so far, well, you can always try using Microsoft Active Accessibility. Now, this is just a setting that you turn on in TestComplete. There are no changes that get made to the application's code. There's no files that get copied to the application server, no changes made to the system you're testing from. It's really just a box that you check in TestComplete. I do need to point out, though, that this approach does not give the same level of object recognition as the others. So if you use MSAA, TestComplete may not be able to see all the objects, methods, and properties that it can see by using one of the other methods. So I don't recommend this approach, but if it's all you can do, well, it's there, and there you go. And again, a little bit more information about that can be found right here at this URL. Now, as far as Adobe Air goes, that does require a special file be included in the application's compilation. And it's very similar to the Flex client library that we talked about a few minutes ago. Basically, your developers just need to include that file inside their build process, and then TestComplete will be able to get access to the internals, just like what you saw me doing just a moment ago. And I just put that URL into the chat window as well, so you can grab it and take it from there. Okay, so just to summarize, here's that slide again that Sergey showed you earlier. TestComplete 8.2 really makes it easier to work with Flex and Flash-based applications. You can work with things, right out of the box with or without having, changing your code. And this gives you a tremendous amount of insight into the application's internals and really lets you get under the hood and do the types of testing that you need in ways that you couldn't before. All right, at this point, let's turn things over to the questions that you folks have. I'm going to open up the Q&A panel here, and I want to see what we've got so far. All righty. Okay, our first question. What would you do if you wanted to make sure all the phones are sorted out correctly? That is, all of them are tri-band. Okay, Johnny, so in that case, there's a couple of things I could try. I could create a region checkpoint to verify that all the pictures were present inside of my flex-based application. I could also maybe query the canvas object that all those phones are living on and see how many items are on there. Or I could create individual property checkpoints to capture the names of the phones that were displayed on screen and verify that they were correct. So I had a couple of options in terms of how that goes. Jaspinder asks, what happens if the user doesn't provide a name for the label? Well, in that case, like what you saw with the text box, TestComplete will fetch a reference to the object based on its class type and its index. So it won't be as intuitive. You know, you won't be able to just read the thing and know, oh yeah, I know what field that is. But you could then go in and change the object's name in the name mapping editor like what we did earlier to give it a more descriptive name in the tests. Sudhir asks, since object coordinates are being recorded, what will happen when the object's placement changes? So this is a good thing to point out, folks. The actual objects that are being, or coordinates that are being tracked, are not being used to identify the objects on screen. Rather, they're being used to identify where against a particular object the action should be performed. So let's look at this text input edit state. Okay, we'll zoom in on this guy. We're recognizing the control based on its actual name. So text input edit state, that can be right here, it can be in the top right corner of the screen, it can be in the bottom left corner of the screen. TestComplete doesn't care. It's always going to find the object based on its name. But the coordinates that you see here, 110.8, that's showing where the click was performed. And you can see in the screenshot that little red circle that's drawn around the mouse arrow. That's showing where I clicked on that control during the recording process. So that coordinate is just being used to tell TestComplete where to perform the action on the object. It's not being used to identify the object itself. So think about it like if a text field didn't come live unless you actually clicked at a certain point on it. Or if you're working with an image map and you need to click at a particular point in that image map in order to go to the desired page. In those cases, TestComplete is recording the coordinates because they may be relevant later on. I could take those coordinates out of that line completely, just have it be a click event, and TestComplete would still be able to find the element no problem at all. Alejandro asks, can I see the code of this test? Yeah, absolutely. In fact, you can convert any keyword test that you've got into a script-based test just by right-clicking on it and saying convert to script. And that will take all your actions that you've recorded and then render them in whatever scripting language you chose. So when I created my project, I chose JScript. So TestComplete is now rendering all those actions for me as code. So yeah, you certainly can go ahead and change your tests and view them as code. Okay, Scott asks, can you execute a series of tests built with TestComplete as a batch file, that is a command line interface? Yes, absolutely. In fact, I believe, let's see, I have a little hyperlink right here for you, Scott, which details TestComplete's command line interface. I'm going to send that to everybody on the call. You can check that out and you can see all the commands that TestComplete provides. You can then write a batch file, throw that batch file in to the Windows Task Scheduler, and then every day at 2 o'clock in the morning your test could kick off and you go from there. Okay, how effective is the Flex object for custom objects? Jyoti asks, it's going to be able to recognize the at least the native objects in there. Jyoti, I'm not sure I understand exactly the scenario you're looking for. Maybe you could give me an example of what you're going through and we can take it from there. David asks, do Flex web apps require a special file as well? No, you don't need to have special files included in the website. You can use either the Flex Injector approach that I mentioned earlier or the runtime file loader as well. So you could check that out and then you don't need to compile your web applications with a special file. Okay. A couple of folks are asking questions about registering and having difficulty to register with a particular for the webinar. Sergey, do you want to take that one, or do you want to?
Yeah, I can. I guess first of all, I want to offer apologies, as it wasn't expected. As a matter of fact, I've used GoToWebinar for a while, both as a presenter and as a listener. Never had a registration problem. And Rachel asked why TestComplete didn't find the problem where the user couldn't hit the button with the mouse. They need to hit the enter. And while the webinar was going on, actually went and checked whether Citrix, the provider of GoToWebinar, is one of our customers, and turns out that they are for Code Collaborator, but not for TestComplete. So maybe we'll go to them and say that, well, hey, you know, we could have helped your user base to identify the problem. So we'll report as far as how successful we are pitching our tools to them. But it's certainly something that TestComplete can do easily.
Okay, Tak asks, can you run automated tests via script, and what languages are available? So yeah, you certainly can create your tests as script-based tests. In fact, you can record a test directly as script right here in this drop-down button. I can click that and choose record script, and now TestComplete would go into record mode and then render all my actions as code as opposed to a keyword test. And in terms of the languages that are available, you can do your coding in VBScript, JScript, DelphiScript, or a couple of proprietary languages that we have, which are called C# script and C++ script. I'd say the bulk of our users, though, are using either VBScript or JScript for that purpose. Let's see, Scott asks, can you generate testing results report on the fly after running a series of tests? That is, email results to a group. Yeah, absolutely, Scott. In fact, you can, after a test is done, if we go over here to the test log, you can actually just right-click on the test log itself and say send via email. And that will allow you to just pick a series of views. I don't have this system isn't set up to an email server right now, but I could just send it out to a bunch of my users and have them take a look at the results if they'd like. So yeah, no problem there. Frank asks, does TestComplete handle different browsers and browser versions? Yeah, TestComplete supports Internet Explorer 5 through 8 and Firefox 1.5 through 3.6, so no problem there. Okay, next question. Let's see. Okay, so James Rayburn, you've got a question there. That's something that's going to be a better fielded by our support team, James. I'm not really geared to answer that sort of question right now. I'm sorry, but if you send that off to our support team, they can help you out there. Let's see. Next question from Lax, who's saying, gave me an option to use TestComplete's runtime loader and re-record the test. So basically what that's saying is that TestComplete wasn't getting access into the application's internals because it hadn't been prepared in a certain way. Either you hadn't compiled the files or you hadn't added the runtime loader files to the server. So if you look through those links that I sent through earlier, you'll be able to see the step-by-step instructions to get the object recognition going there, and you can take it from there. Okay, let's see. Next question is from Jan, who asks, how does TestComplete handle drag and drop? Okay, so drag and drop is one of those animals that's always kind of a challenge to work with. What I'll do, Jan, is after this call, I'll have an article sent over to you that describes how to use TestComplete in relation to drag and drop and the coding that we'll need to go in and help with that. Okay, let's see. Next question. Okay, folks, one thing, if you have questions that are not related to Air and Flex and Flash, this is not the right avenue for those. So some folks are asking about Java, some folks are asking about tree controls that aren't Flex or Flash based. We're not going to have time to field those, so it's better if you send those types of questions off to your account representative or to your the support team in order to get those kinds of things written out. Okay, Emil asks, how would you deal with dynamic data in an error app that might get populated after a server query returns? So that's going to depend on what exactly is going on there, Emil, but you could have TestComplete perform a query against a database, retrieve the values from that query, and then compare those values to what's on screen. That's one approach that you might be able to take. Going to depend on what exactly your test is doing, but that's one approach that I'd recommend. Okay, next question is from Richard, and Richard's asking how to automate items that manage the nth item in a list or grid, assuming the renderer does not know its index. Okay, Richard, what I'll do for you there is I'll send you over an article that talks about working with grids, and you can see how that works out. Okay. Richard asks, will TestComplete create ActionScript? No, TestComplete will only render one of those languages that I mentioned earlier. So either VB script, JScript, Delphi script, C++ script, or C# script. Okay. Richard also asks, can I create code that does not require the TestComplete runtime? No, TestComplete does either require TestComplete itself in order to run, or our runtime license, which is called TestExecute. Okay, David asks, are there any issues with Flex apps in IE and Firefox? Nope. The actions will be recognized in both browsers. No sweat there. John asks, can you record outside a firewall? Will the object recognition still work? Yeah, John, it should. That shouldn't be a problem there. Vhang asks, what's a better approach, Flash Injector or Runtime Loader? Either approach is going to get you the same thing. Really, what it boils down to is just how the process gets set up. So with Flash Injector, you're going to be you're making changes to the system that's doing the testing. You're adding a config file, you're adding an item to a list of trusted locations, that sort of thing. Whereas with the runtime loader, you're just putting 2 files on the server. So if you don't have access to the server, maybe it's in a restricted location or something like that, then you're better off using the Flash Injector. So it's just a matter of what your environment's all about and your own preferences there. Okay, let's see, scrolling. Hairmouth asks, how can we simulate choosing dates in a field chooser flex object? You should be able to just record clicking inside there and selecting from a calendar. If that doesn't work, you might be able to just type in the date directly, or you can inspect the control via that object spy that I showed you earlier and set its value programmatically. So you got a couple of choices there in terms of how that's going to work. Got a question here about if the presentation is being recorded. Yes, it is, and there'll be a recording made available a little later on, either this week or early next week. Let's see. Got a question here about applications class names and indexes and properties changing at runtime from run to run. And in those cases, Pankaj, those are more related to the object recognition itself as opposed to Flex and Flash stuff. What I'll do is I'll have someone send you over a video that talks about how to work with dynamic objects, and you can kind of take that from there. Okay. Got a couple of other people asking for the drag and drop article. So Chris and Raymond and Rachel and Scott. Okay, no problem. Okay, got a couple questions here about grids, and TestComplete can work with flex grids, so no sweat there. We can work with that. Let's see. Jayathi says, I have several custom objects in my Flex app like pie charts, trees, but they all seem to be recognized as graphic objects. Chances are you're not using one of the new methods that we talked about today. You might be using just MSAA to look at TestComplete. And like I said, MSAA is kind of the weak option in terms of how to get it to work with Flex or Flash. So try working with one of the new mechanisms that we talked about today, like the Flash Injector or the runtime loader, and you'll be able to get much better recognition there. Okay. Scott's asking, does this work with Flex 3 and Flex 4? I believe so. Sergey, is that right?
Yes, at this point, TestComplete 8.2 supports Flex 3.0 through Flex 4.1. We'll be making an update release for 4.5 when it comes out. So at this point, all the commonly used versions of Flex are supported. Just to note, since Nick used a very well-known Flex Store application that is also available on the Adobe website somewhere to test, the original application is written in Flex 2. So if you go to the Adobe source and try to run that through TestComplete, it's not going to work just like Nick showed, because we actually got the source and rebuilt it in Flex 4. So many thanks to Adobe for providing that and helping us go through the build process. But just to note for the folks who might want to go the easy route to evaluate TestComplete capabilities that way. Since I am speaking now, I'll take that as an opportunity to answer some of the forward-looking questions as far as what we support and, if not, when we will. There's a question, is TestComplete integrated with build systems? TestComplete has a command line interface as well as a COM interface. So you can make integration work this way, but either way you can put it in a batch system. We also have, as I mentioned, automated build system of our own, and that's a fantastic automation framework, not just for builds, but for the complete application lifecycle management, starting from code check-in and all the way down to deploying your applications where they need to be. And, for example, there are seamless integration steps in that build system specifically for TestComplete. But with any of the build systems starting from make and all the way, you can just use the command line interface for TestComplete for automation. There is a question about Chrome support, since Nick mentioned Internet Explorer and Firefox in one of his previous answers. Chrome support is on the roadmap for this year. The dates are a little bit floating, but my best guess is we're going to release support for it no later than Q3. There was also a question about how TestComplete compares to FlexMonkey. I have to admit I haven't used FlexMonkey personally. All I can rely on is what's available on the web. But hopefully you've seen through Nick's demo some of the premium features that I believe are unique to TestComplete among all tools, all automated tools that are available. There are some features in FlexMonkey such as ActionScript support or Flex Unit support that may be appealing, but at the same time, TestComplete provides scriptless mode, let's say for building the tests, the keyword-driven tests. So the script question kind of becomes irrelevant. So we believe it's, while FlexMonkey is an excellent tool and at price zero, it's kind of hard to beat. But for any sophisticated testing, TestComplete will offer far more to build well-maintainable tests, not to mention that TestComplete supports a whole slew of other environments beyond Flex and Flash. So for large enterprise customers who have environments beyond Flash and Flex, this is a very appealing offer. Back to you, Nick.
Okay, great. So thanks, Sergey. I've got a couple of things, folks. I pasted a link into the chat window for the drag and drop article, since there were, I don't know, probably about 400 people who asked for that after I mentioned it. So there's a link for that right there. You don't need to wait. Also, some of you have asked about how TestComplete can work with dynamic objects, and I've put this link into the chat window as well. You can go ahead and grab that video. That'll walk you through how you can handle things that change. So a couple of you out there have asked for that. Pankaj and Richard, you both asked for that. Some of other folks out there may be interested in it as well. And then let's take a quick look at some of the other questions that have come through since Sergey was going there. Chris asks, can you update your tests with changes in the objects when you run those tests? So if an application changes, is there a maintenance mode? And yes, there is a way you can go in and tell TestComplete to update its checkpoints so that they will automatically reflect new values inside your application. Let's see. Got time for a couple more questions here. And the next one is going to be right here from Arnold, who's asking, would I use TestComplete and unit testing, or is there an overlap of coverage? Well, your unit testing is going to really get down at the, the library level and make sure the individual functions are working properly. But then your TestComplete tests are going to be verifying the overall user experience. So you know that an individual method called add works properly, but does that add method work properly when it's being called from the UI? That's where TestComplete is going to come in and verify things are working for you there. So really, by combining unit testing and functional testing with TestComplete, you get a much more comprehensive testing package, and that gives you a lot more confidence in the tests that you are working with. Santosh is asking if there's going to be a recording of this webinar. Yes, absolutely. There will be a link to the video sent out to everybody who participated. Sergey, we've had a couple people ask about Flex Mobile. Do you know if TestComplete is going to work with that?
Well, actually, I have to admit I'm not familiar with details of Flex Mobile specifically. If it's Flex running on mobile browsers or Flex running under Air on mobile systems, then we are initiating a project for supporting mobile apps. As Nick mentioned, we support Windows Mobile all the way through 6.5. We don't support Windows 7 yet. So it's certainly something on our radar, but we can't really share any specific plans or dates for the releases. But it's, as I said, this is certainly well within our attention, particularly considering both the commonality of Adobe applications on mobile devices, as well as Adobe's own focus on mobile applications and Test Anywhere.
Great, cool, thank you. So just one last thing, folks. I just pasted a link to working with grids inside the chat window there. Richard had asked about that, and I thought some of you folks out there may also be interested, so you can grab that link right there. At this point, thank you all for your questions very much. We really appreciate it. If you have questions that we weren't able to field today, that weren't related to Flex, Flash, or Air, or if you just had, we ran out of time, just send those questions over to either your account representative or to our support team, and they'll be able to help you get things sorted out. In the meantime, Sergey, I'm going to pass things back to you so you can share your last couple of slides with us.
Thank you, Nick. Just get organized here. So obviously wanted to thank everyone for attending. We are very happy to have had such a large audience, and certainly the questions have been very interesting and showed a lot of interest. We wanted to alert you to a very interesting webinar that we have coming up. It's with Forrester Research with a general focus on empowering your testing team, obviously a subject very near and dear to our heart. It's on Tuesday, March 1st at 1 p.m. Eastern, and Margot Visitation is going to discuss how testing teams can work with the business counterparts on planning and execution testing strategy. You can go to our website and register for that webinar, and certainly we'll be conducting an email campaign to get the invitations to our customer base. So we hope to see you at that webinar. It's going to be very interesting. She is a person responsible for the test technologies at Forrester, so she has a lot of insight into both the technology and the business aspects of deploying the right test strategies. With that, just wanted to remind you about our website. We offer affordable tools. We also have a family of free tools that we offer, which could be interesting to some of the participants. I would particularly encourage you folks to try Dev Planner and QA Planner, our free versions of hosted development and test planning packages, respectively. So if you can go at smartbear.com/free, you will be able to look at those tools. With that, we are out of time. Great having you for the webinar, and stay tuned for more exciting stuff coming from SmartBear. Take care, folks.
Bye, everyone.